Two men. Two completely opposite approaches to awakening human consciousness. One destroyed the ego through conscious suffering. The other dissolved it through extreme pleasure. One demanded iron discipline and work on oneself. The other preached total surrender and celebration of life. George Gurdjieff and Osho Rajneesh, the most controversial spiritual masters in modern history. For decades, these two spiritual giants divided opinions and transformed lives in radically different ways. Gurdjieff, the Caucasian master who forged souls through the fire of consciousness. Osho, the Indian rebel who liberated minds through inner revolution. But which of them possessed the most dangerous teaching for human illusions? Today, you will discover the truth behind this epic battle between two philosophies that shook the spiritual structures of the 20th century. A comparison that will reveal not only who was right, but which approach truly transforms the human being at the deepest level. What you are about to discover about these two masters will change your perception of what it truly means to awaken forever. Because what separated Gurdjieff from Osho was not just method, it was a completely different vision of the nature of human consciousness. George Gurdjieff believed that the human being is born as a biological machine, functioning automatically through unconscious programming. For him, awakening required a Herculean effort to break these programs through voluntary conscious suffering. At the Prior, his students were subjected to exercises that challenged all physical and psychological limits. Man must suffer consciously, Gurdjieff said. He deliberately created uncomfortable situations, strenuous physical work, exercises that exposed psychological weaknesses, and calculated emotional shocks. Catherine Mansfield died of tuberculosis at the Prior, but claimed to have found a dimension of existence that justified all the suffering. Rajneesh Chandra Mohan, known as Osho, saw repression as the root of all human suffering. For him, society had created a neurotic human being through centuries of religious and social conditioning. His approach was diametrically opposed: celebrate life in its totality, body, mind, and spirit. In Pune and later in Oregon, Osho created a community where his followers experienced total freedom, sexual, emotional, and creative. His dynamic meditations included shouting, wild dancing, and cathartic expression of all repressed emotions. "Don't repress anything," was his mantra. "What you resist, persists." But what few know is that behind these opposite approaches lay a philosophical confrontation that will shock you. If you are intrigued by this battle between two spiritual giants, leave a like so more people can discover this explosive comparison. Although they never met in person, Gurdjieff and Osho waged a philosophical war through their teachings. Osho harshly criticized Gurdjieff in his lectures, calling him authoritarian and unnecessarily cruel. Gurdjieff, in turn, had foreseen the emergence of masters like Osho, warning of the dangers of easy spirituality. For Gurdjieff, the greatest danger was not suffering, but the illusion of awakening without real work. He saw spiritual movements based on pleasure and celebration as colorful dreams that kept people asleep on a more subtle level. "You want to awaken without paying the price," he told lazy students. Osho considered Gurdjieff a spiritual masochist who perpetuated patterns of repression. For him, any system that required voluntary suffering was a continuation of the religious neurosis that had enslaved humanity for millennia. Gurdjieff creates spiritual soldiers, not free human beings, he declared in his lectures. But there was something they both agreed on: conventional spirituality was completely ineffective. Both Gurdjieff and Osho were demolishing masters. They destroyed people's spiritual illusions before offering anything real. The difference was in the method of destruction. Gurdjieff said, "I teach how to die consciously in order to be born again." Osho replied, "I teach how to live totally to discover who you really are." Do you believe that spiritual awakening requires conscious suffering, or can it happen through the total celebration of life? What happened when the methods of these two masters were tested in real life will challenge everything you believe about spiritual transformation. Gurdjieff's students developed a unique quality: unbreakable presence. P.D. Ouspensky, a brilliant mathematician, abandoned a prosperous academic career to dedicate 20 years to Gurdjieff's work. Jean de Salzman worked with Gurdjieff for 3 decades and continued to transmit his teachings until she was 101 years old. But the price was high. Many students could not bear the intensity and abandoned the work. Others developed a kind of spiritual rigidity, becoming awakening machines without human warmth. Catherine Mansfield died in the process, although she claimed to have died consciously. Osho's followers experienced unprecedented psychological freedom. Thousands of people freed themselves from sexual traumas, religious conditioning, and family repressions. The Rajneeshpuram community in Oregon grew to 7,000 inhabitants and functioned as a prosperous alternative society. But total freedom also came at a price. Many followers got lost in directionless hedonism. The movement itself fragmented into scandals, political manipulations, and even mass poisoning attempts. Osho died prematurely, possibly poisoned, and his community disintegrated. Here's the truth no one wants to admit: both methods worked, but they also failed. Gurdjieff created extraordinarily conscious human beings, but some became too rigid to live fully. Osho freed people from all repressions, but some got lost in total freedom. But there's something few realized about this philosophical battle. The discovery you are about to hear reveals why both masters were right and wrong at the same time. The truth is that Gurdjieff and Osho were not opposites, they were complementary. Gurdjieff worked with people who needed structure and discipline to awaken. Osho worked with people who needed freedom and celebration to break free. Both were dealing with different types of human sleep. Few know that Gurdjieff also taught celebration and conscious pleasure. His famous feasts at the Prior involved music, dance, abundant food, and alcohol. But all this happened after years of disciplined self-work. First learn to work, then learn to play consciously, was his hidden principle. And Osho, despite preaching total freedom, also demanded rigorous discipline from his intimate disciples. His dynamic meditations followed precise structures. He would wake up at 2 a.m. to meditate for hours. True freedom is born from supreme discipline, he would say in private conversations. The most dangerous teaching belonged neither to Gurdjieff nor to Osho in isolation. It was the synthesis of both, conscious discipline and total celebration. Work on oneself and authentic freedom. Sacred suffering and divine pleasure. This synthesis was so dangerous that few dared to attempt it. Comment which approach resonates more with you, Gurdjieff's discipline or Osho's freedom, or can you see the synthesis between both? But the most explosive revelation about these two masters was yet to come. Today, Gurdjieff foundations around the world continue to transmit his teachings to small, selected groups. There is no marketing, no proselytizing. The work is transmitted from person to person, like a sacred fire that can only be lit by someone who has already been set alight. Osho's teachings, on the other hand, spread like wildfire. Millions of books sold, hundreds of meditation centers, influence in self-help and personal development movements worldwide. His spiritual revolution changed how the West views meditation, sexuality, and spirituality. What few realize is that many modern therapists and masters unconsciously combine elements of both. Gestalt therapy incorporates Gurdjieffian aspects of body consciousness. Active meditations use techniques inspired by Osho. The synthesis happens naturally. A student who worked with both traditions said, "Gurdjieff taught me who I was not. Osho showed me who I could be. But discovering who I truly am was my work." So, which had the most dangerous teaching? The answer is surprising. Neither one in isolation. The most dangerous was the possibility of combining both, creating human beings who are disciplined and free, conscious and celebratory, hardworking and playful. How would you integrate Gurdjieff's conscious discipline with Osho's celebratory freedom into your own spiritual journey? Gurdjieff versus Osho was not a battle, it was a cosmic dance. Two aspects of the same spiritual truth manifesting through opposing personalities. Gurdjieff represented the masculine principle of spirituality, structure, discipline, awakening through effort. Osho represented the feminine principle, fluidity, celebration, awakening through surrender. In today's world, we desperately need both. Gurdjieff's discipline to cut through digital distractions and develop real presence. Osho's freedom to liberate ourselves from social conditioning and celebrate our authenticity. It's not a choice, it's an integration. True awakening in the 21st century demands the courage to embrace both conscious work and total celebration. Both sacred suffering and divine pleasure. Both iron discipline and absolute freedom. This is the synthesis that both masters secretly pointed towards. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications for more explosive comparisons between humanity's great spiritual masters. Gurdjieff said, "Man can be what he wishes to be." Osho replied, "Man already is what he seeks." The truth. Both were right. The most dangerous teaching is to discover that you are both the seeker and the found, both the problem and the solution, both the disciple and the master.